Hey there, travelers. Before we dive into today's story, drop a comment below telling us where you're tuning in from. Now let's begin our journey into the unknown. My eyes snapped open to complete blackness, and I realized with mounting horror that I couldn't breathe. Something was in my mouth, something alive. It writhed against my tongue, segmented and slick, tiny barbs catching on the soft tissue as it forced itself deeper. I gagged, tried to scream, but my jaw wouldn't close. Strong hands held my head immobile against cold stone. The thing pushed harder, and I felt it reach the back of my throat. Felt the muscles there convulse as it began sliding down. Then, a gunshot. The crack of it split the air like thunder in a tomb. The hands released me. The creature in my mouth went slack, its segments still gripping my tongue but no longer pushing. I heard shouting in Korean, running footsteps, more gunfire echoing off stone walls. "Don't swallow it. Spit it out. Now." The voice was American, familiar. I gagged violently, turned my head, and vomited the creature onto the stone floor beside me. It hit the ground with a wet slap. 4 inches of segmented nightmare that looked like someone had crossed a lamprey with a centipede. Even in the dim emergency lighting, I could see it twitching, its tiny legs clawing at nothing. A boot came down hard, crushing it. Dark ichor sprayed across the ancient stone, releasing a smell like ammonia mixed with decay. "John, get up. We've got 47 seconds before they restart." I blinked up at the figure standing over me, my vision swimming. Andrew Kim. 3 weeks missing, presumed dead or compromised, and here he was with a rifle in his hands and a look in his eyes that told me he'd seen things that would haunt him forever. Restart? My voice came out as a croak, my throat raw where those barbs had torn the tissue. Andrew grabbed my arm, hauled me to my feet with surprising strength. My wrists were raw from restraints I didn't remember being applied, and my legs felt like they belonged to someone else. The workers. They freeze when the frequency stops, but only for about a minute. Then they reboot. I looked past him and saw them. Dozens of people standing perfectly still around the cavern, tools in hand, faces expressionless. They weren't blinking, weren't breathing normally, just standing there like mannequins waiting for someone to pull their strings again. What the hell did they do to me? I touched my mouth, felt the raw tissue where those barbs had caught. Blood and saliva mixed with something else, something that smelled wrong. They tried to infect you. Same thing they did to everyone else in this godforsaken place. Andrew thrust a pistol into my hands. "Can you run?" I nodded, though everything felt distant and unreal, like I was watching someone else's body move. Then we move. Now. 72 hours earlier, I'd crossed into North Korea through a tunnel system that dated back to the Korean War. The passage was barely wide enough for my shoulders, lined with timber that creaked ominously with every movement, and it smelled like standing water and 50 years of accumulated fear. I'd done insertions before, Syria, Yemen, the mountains of Afghanistan. But this felt different. This felt like stepping into a grave that hadn't been dug yet. My handler's voice had been calm during the briefing. The way it always was when they were sending you somewhere the odds said you wouldn't return from. Andrew Kim, one of our best assets in the region, went dark 3 weeks ago. Last transmission placed him investigating the village of Songrim, population 400, all isolated from major infrastructure. He was following up on reports of a biological weapons program. Something the satellite imaging couldn't explain. We need you to find him and retrieve whatever intelligence he gathered. And if he's dead, then we need to know what killed him. Simple. Clean. The kind of mission briefing that usually meant complications you couldn't predict and violence you couldn't avoid. I emerged from the tunnel 2 kilometers south of Songrim just after midnight, the air cold enough to sting my lungs with each breath. The countryside was dark. Not just the absence of streetlights, but the absolute void of a nation that couldn't afford to waste electricity on rural areas. Through my night vision goggles, the landscape resolved into shades of green. Rice paddies stretching toward low hills, scattered farmhouses with tin roofs, and in the distance, the village itself. That's when I noticed the first thing that made my skin crawl. The fields were full of people. At 2 in the morning, just standing there among the rice stalks, perfectly still, all of them facing the same direction, like they were waiting for something that would never come. I counted 27 before I stopped counting, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. They didn't move, didn't shift their weight, didn't do any of the small unconscious movements that living people make, just stood. I watched them through my scope for 20 minutes. Not one of them moved. Songrim looked like it had been frozen in time, or maybe frozen in place would be more accurate. The buildings were typical rural Korean construction, single-story houses with corrugated tin roofs, a few concrete structures that might have been administrative buildings or storage facilities, but everything was too neat, too organized. No trash in the streets, no dogs barking, no lights in any windows despite the early morning hour when people should have been preparing for the day's work. I'd come in with forged documents identifying me as an agricultural inspector from Pyongyang, complete with the stamps and signatures that would pass casual inspection. It was a thin cover, but in a place this remote, it might be enough to move around without raising immediate suspicion. The real trick would be finding Andrew's trail without alerting whoever had made him disappear. The first person I encountered was a woman, maybe 40 years old, working in a small vegetable garden beside one of the houses. She moved with mechanical precision. Bend, pull weeds, stand, move 2 steps left, bend again. The exact same sequence, repeated over and over like a machine executing programmed instructions. When I approached, she didn't look up. "Excuse me," I said in Korean, keeping my accent as close to the Pyongyang dialect as I could manage. "I'm here to conduct agricultural inspections for the regional committee. Can you tell me where I might find the village administrator?" She stopped mid-motion, her hand frozen above a weed. Then, slowly, mechanically, she turned her head to look at me. Her eyes were glassy, pupils dilated despite the morning sun beginning to crest the hills. There was an amber-colored residue crusted around her lips and in the corners of her eyes, like she'd been crying tears of honey. She smiled. It was the most unnatural thing I'd ever seen. Lips pulling back from teeth in the approximation of warmth, but with absolutely no emotion behind it. No recognition, no humanity. "Welcome to Songrim," she said, her voice flat and effectless, like someone reading phonetically from a script they didn't understand. "The administrator will see you at the municipal building." Then she turned back to her weeding, resumed the exact same motions, as if I'd never interrupted her at all, as if I'd never existed. I walked through the village with every nerve on high alert, my training screaming at me that something was catastrophically wrong here. More people emerged as the morning progressed. They didn't talk to each other, didn't acknowledge each other's existence. They just performed their tasks with robotic efficiency, sweeping, repairing, carrying supplies from building to building in perfectly straight lines. And every single one of them had that amber residue around their mouths and ears. I pulled out my thermal scanner, pretending to check soil temperature while really checking body heat. The readings made my stomach turn. Every person in the village was running a fever, 104 degrees Fahrenheit. That kind of temperature should have them delirious, hallucinating, barely functional. Instead, they worked like machines that never needed rest. The municipal building was easy to find. The only concrete structure with a functioning door and faded paint that might have once been red. Inside, the walls were covered with propaganda posters showing happy workers and abundant harvests. All of it yellowed and peeling like the skin of something long dead. The administrator's office was empty, but on the desk I found something that made my blood run cold. A photograph. Recent, judging by the quality. It showed children, maybe 30 of them, ages 5 to 12, standing in neat rows in front of what looked like a schoolhouse. And every single one of them was staring directly at the camera with those same glassy, dead eyes I'd seen in the woman's face. I flipped the photograph over, written on the back in neat Korean characters, April 2023, 2 years ago. I went to the schoolhouse next, my hands shaking as I pushed open the door. It was abandoned, desks overturned, children's drawings still pinned to the walls with rusted tacks. But the drawings were all identical, not similar, identical, crude depictions of people standing in rows, and above them, something that looked like a sun but was drawn in amber crayon instead of yellow or red. Beneath each drawing, the same Korean characters repeated over and over. The harmony, In the teacher's desk, I found a class roster, 32 names, each one written in a different hand. The students had signed their own names. But at the bottom, written in red ink, integration complete, all nodes functioning. I photographed everything with my concealed camera, my mind racing through possibilities and rejecting each one as too impossible, too insane. But the evidence was right here in front of me. I spent the day searching for any trace of Andrew, moving through the village with my inspector cover, taking soil samples and temperature readings, while really looking for anything that might tell me where he'd gone. The villagers ignored me after their initial mechanical greetings, returning to their synchronized tasks like I was just another piece of furniture. I noticed they all stopped at exactly the same time for lunch, 12 noon precisely, and all resumed at exactly 12:30. No variation, no individuality. As the sun began its descent toward the hills, I made my way to the village well, the one landmark Andrew had mentioned in his last transmission. It was old, constructed from stones that looked like they predated the village itself, maybe even predated the modern era. I lowered the bucket on its rope, pulled it back up. The water was crystal clear, too clear, unnaturally clear. I tested it with my field kit, completely sterile. No bacteria, no minerals, nothing that should be in natural water. Like it had been filtered through industrial purification equipment that didn't exist in a village this remote. That's when I saw the glint of metal at the bottom of the well, barely visible in the fading light. I secured my rappelling line to the stone lip, checked my harness twice, and descended into the dampness below. The walls were slick with algae and condensation, and the air got colder with each foot. At the bottom, wedged between the rocks where the water pooled, was Andrew's camera. Waterproof case, still sealed, still intact. I grabbed it and climbed back up, my arms burning with the effort. The photographs on the memory card told a story that transformed my mission from search and rescue into something much darker. Andrew had found the mine, an old excavation site in the hills north of the village, supposedly abandoned decades ago according to official records, but his photos showed it was very much active. Images of people carrying pickaxes and hauling carts full of amber-colored rocks that seemed to glow with their own internal bioluminescence. Images of guards in military uniforms, but not standard North Korean army issue. These wore full hazmat suits and carried automatic weapons with live ammunition. And images of the mine entrance, where that same amber glow emanated from deep underground, pulsing in rhythmic waves like a heartbeat. The last photo was time-stamped 3 weeks ago, taken with maximum zoom, a close-up of one of the amber chunks. Inside it, suspended in the mineral like a mosquito preserved in tree sap, was a creature. Segmented body, curved like a crescent moon, with tiny legs along its length and what looked like mandibles or hooks at one end. Even in the photograph, frozen in time, I could see the detail was perfect. Pristine preservation. And beneath the photo, Andrew had typed a single message in the metadata. They're not mining. They're harvesting. I reached the mine entrance just after midnight, moving through the pitch black with my night vision active. The village had gone completely silent after sunset, every resident returning to their homes at exactly 8 p.m. like they'd received a signal I couldn't hear. No lights appeared in windows, no movement anywhere. It was like the entire place had simply powered down, waiting to be activated again. The mine entrance was hidden in a narrow valley, concealed by deliberately placed boulders and scrub brush that looked natural but had clearly been arranged by human hands. I would have missed it entirely if not for the faint amber glow that leaked from the opening, creating an eerie bioluminescence in the oppressive darkness. I could hear something too, a low humming that seemed to come from deep underground, accompanied by a higher-pitched tone just at the edge of human hearing that made my teeth ache and my vision blur slightly. I switched off my flashlight and let my eyes adjust. The amber glow was enough to see by once I entered the tunnel, pulsing in rhythmic waves that matched the humming. The tunnel walls were lined with veins of the stuff, running through the rock like infected blood vessels, each pulse of light traveling along the veins in synchronized waves. I found the first body about 100 meters in. Western clothing, male, face down in the dirt. I turned him over carefully, checking for wounds or identification. Caucasian, maybe 40 years old, with papers in his pocket identifying him as a mining consultant from Mongolia. His mouth was open, jaw dislocated like something had forced it wider than human anatomy allowed. But it was his eyes that made me turn away and fight down the urge to vomit. Completely white, the pupils burst outward in star patterns like something had exploded inside his skull from the inside. There were more bodies deeper in, some in military uniforms, some in civilian clothes. All of them with that same burst-eye look, that same expression of absolute terror frozen in the moment of death. The tunnel opened into a cavern that defied belief. It must have been the size of an aircraft hangar, carved entirely by human hands judging by the tool marks still visible on the walls. But the scale. This would have taken hundreds of workers years to excavate. Maybe decades. The ceiling was lost in shadow far above, and the amber veins here were thick as tree roots, pulsing with that eerie light. And it was full of people. Living people. Working. They moved through the cavern, swinging pickaxes at the walls in unison, loading carts with amber chunks, pushing the carts toward the far end where I could see the beginning of what looked like a modern processing facility built into the ancient stone. There had to be 200 of them, maybe more, all working in absolute silence except for the sound of tools striking stone and that constant, rhythmic humming that seemed to come from the amber itself. None of them looked up as I entered. None of them acknowledged my presence at all. I was so focused on the workers that I didn't see the hazmat-suited guards until it was too late. They came from the shadows at the cavern's edge, 4 of them, moving with the same synchronized precision as the workers. No shouting, no warning. They just grabbed me with inhuman strength. I fought back on pure instinct, landed a solid elbow to one's faceplate, heard the satisfying crack of reinforced plastic shattering and the hiss of the suit's seal breaking. The guard stumbled back, and I saw his face through the shattered visor. Young, Korean, barely 20. His eyes were glassy with that amber residue leaking from his nose and ears. He didn't cry out in pain, didn't react at all except to grab me again, his grip impossibly strong for someone his size. Something pricked my neck, sharp, cold, invasive. I felt numbness spread through my veins, my muscles going slack despite my brain screaming at them to fight, to move, to do anything. The paralytic worked with terrifying speed. Within seconds, I couldn't move anything below my neck, though I could feel everything. Could feel them drag me across the rough stone floor, my body weight scraping against rocks and debris. Could feel my head bounce against the ground as they hauled me deeper into the complex, deeper underground where the amber glow grew brighter, and the humming became almost deafening. They brought me to a chamber that looked like it belonged in a different era entirely. Stone altar carved with intricate Korean shamanic symbols, mixed with what looked like ancient Chinese characters. Walls covered in modern Cyrillic text that clashed violently with the primitive stonework. Scientists in hazmat suits stood around the altar, their faces hidden behind plastic shields, holding clipboards and digital tablets, like they were conducting some kind of experiment they'd performed 1,000 times before. They strapped me down with leather restraints, old and worn but still strong. Wrists, ankles, chest, forehead, immobilizing every part of me except my eyes. I could see everything but do nothing. Could only watch as a scientist leaned over me, shining a penlight in my eyes, checking my pupil response with clinical detachment. She made a note on her clipboard, showed it to another scientist who nodded in approval. Then she held up one of the amber chunks so I could see it clearly, holding it directly in my line of sight, like she wanted me to understand what was about to happen. Inside the amber, perfectly preserved in golden brown resin, was one of those creatures. It looked even worse up close than in Andrew's photograph. The segmentation was more complex than I'd initially thought, with tiny barbs along each segment, and multiple sets of legs that ended in hooks designed to grip and tear. At one end, what I'd thought were mandibles were actually something more complex. Structures that looked disturbingly designed to pry things open. She held the amber over a small burner, heated it slowly and methodically. I watched in paralyzed horror as the creature inside began to move, its legs twitching, its body uncurling from its preserved position. The amber started to crack, hairline fractures spreading through the mineral like lightning frozen in stone. The other scientists gathered closer, their clipboards ready, their posture indicating this was routine observation of a procedure they'd witnessed countless times. They were watching me with the detached interest of researchers observing a lab rat, taking notes on my vital signs, my pupil dilation, probably my heart rate and blood pressure from sensors I couldn't see. The amber shattered with a sound like breaking glass. The creature dropped onto my chest, and even through my shirt I could feel how hot it was from the heating process, almost burning. It sat there for a moment, its legs flexing in precise sequence, its body coiling and uncoiling like it was testing its new freedom after 200 million years of imprisonment. Then it began crawling toward my face with deliberate purpose. I tried to scream, but my jaw wouldn't work. Tried to thrash, but my body wouldn't respond. All I could do was watch as it climbed up my chest with those hooked legs catching on fabric, across my neck where I felt each individual leg press against my skin, reaching my chin. It paused there, and I swear to God I saw intelligence in whatever passed for its eyes, a cold, ancient awareness that had nothing human in it, nothing even mammalian, something that had evolved on an Earth so different it might as well have been an alien planet. It forced itself between my lips, prying my paralyzed jaw open with strength that shouldn't have been possible for something so small. The taste hit me instantly. Copper and rot and chemicals that had no name. It pushed deeper, its barbs catching on my tongue, tearing the tissue, and I felt it reach the back of my throat, felt the desperate, useless convulsions as my body tried to reject it, felt it begin sliding down. The scientists leaned in closer, watching, taking notes, their clinical detachment somehow more terrifying than any expression of malice would have been. That's when the gunshot came, shattering the silence like a bomb going off in a library. The scientist holding the clipboard jerked backward, red mist spraying from her shoulder. The others scattered, and I heard more gunshots, the sharp crack of a rifle firing in rapid succession. The guards, the ones who'd captured me, froze mid-motion, standing perfectly still like someone had pressed pause on a video. Through my limited field of vision, I saw a figure emerge from one of the side tunnels, rifle shouldered, moving with practiced military precision. He shot 2 more guards who tried to intercept him, then crossed to the altar where I was strapped down. "Don't swallow it, spit it out, now." Andrew Kim, 3 weeks missing, presumed dead, and here he was pulling me back from the edge of whatever nightmare these people had planned for me. He cut through my restraints with a combat knife, and the moment my jaw was free to move, I gagged violently, turning my head and vomiting the creature onto the stone floor. It landed with that wet slap, still moving, still trying to complete its purpose. Andrew's boot came down hard, crushing it into paste. The dark ichor that sprayed out smelled like nothing else on Earth, chemical and organic and ancient all at once. "John, get up. We've got 47 seconds before they restart." I managed to sit up, my head spinning, my throat raw and bleeding. "Restart? What are you—" Andrew pointed to the guards, the workers visible through the chamber entrance. All of them standing perfectly still, completely motionless, like their power had been cut. "The workers," he said, his eyes scanning the chamber for threats. "They freeze when the frequency stops, but only for about a minute. Then they reboot, and they'll be coming for us." He pulled me to my feet, thrust a pistol into my shaking hands. "Can you run?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure my legs would support me. "Then we move. Now. Because when they restart—" He glanced at his watch. 30 seconds. When they restart, they won't stop until they've completed their task." "What task?" Andrew looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that I'd never seen before. Not in Syria, not in any of the hellholes we'd operated in together before he went dark. Pure existential dread. The same thing they tried to do to you, the same thing they did to everyone else in this place. He grabbed my arm, started pulling me toward the tunnel. "They're not people anymore, John. They're nodes, and if we don't move right now, we're about to become nodes too." Behind us, I heard the first sound of movement. The workers, restarting, and their footsteps were perfectly synchronized, a mechanical march that echoed through the ancient stone like a heartbeat. We ran into the tunnels, and behind us, the army of the infected followed in perfect unison. He ran through tunnels that twisted like intestines through the earth, our footsteps echoing off wet stone while behind us came that sound. The synchronized march of hundreds of infected workers moving as one organism. The amber veins in the walls pulsed faster now, responding to the pursuit. And I realized with growing horror that the mine itself was somehow alive, somehow aware of our presence. "Left here," Andrew gasped, pulling me into a side passage so narrow we had to turn sideways to squeeze through. The opening was barely visible, hidden behind a collapsed support beam that looked natural, but had clearly been placed deliberately. We pushed through, and immediately the sound of pursuit faded, muffled by layers of stone. The passage opened into a small chamber, maybe 10 feet across, carved from solid rock. A battery-powered lantern sat on a crude shelf, casting pale light over what was clearly Andrew's hiding place. The walls were covered in photographs, maps, handwritten notes in his tight, precise script. This was where he'd been living for 3 weeks, where he'd been documenting the nightmare. I collapsed against the wall, my legs finally giving out. My throat was still raw where those barbs had torn the tissue, and I could taste blood mixed with something chemical that made me want to vomit again. "What the hell is happening here, Andrew? What are those things?" He handed me a bottle of water, his hand shaking slightly. "Drink, all of it. You need to flush your system." I drank, the water stinging but necessary. That's when I noticed the scarring around Andrew's left ear. Fresh scars, barely healed, running from his ear canal down to his jaw in thin lines that looked surgical. "Did they get one in you?" Andrew's jaw tightened. "They tried. I got it out before it reached my brain. Mostly." "Mostly?" He sat down across from me, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. "The parasite damaged my auditory nerve before I could kill it, but it left something behind, some kind of residual connection to their network. Sometimes I can hear them, the infected. It's like static in the back of my mind, getting louder when they're close. That's how I knew they'd captured you. I heard the frequency change when they brought you to the ritual chamber." I looked at the walls, at the evidence he'd been gathering. Photos of the mine, the workers, close-ups of the amber deposits. But it was the medical charts that caught my attention. Diagrams showing the infection process step by step, with clinical precision that spoke of weeks of careful observation. "Tell me everything," I said. Andrew stood, walked to his wall of documentation. "The parasites create a hive network. Chemical signals coordinate the infected, synchronizing their movements, their thoughts. But they're not just mindless drones, John. The transformation happens in stages." He pointed to a series of photographs showing the same subject over time. First 6 to 12 hours after infection, the host retains most of their motor skills and intelligence. They can still talk, still perform complex tasks, but they're already part of the network, already being controlled. That's when they're most dangerous because they can pass as human. The next photos showed the progression, the subject's skin taking on a grayish tint, eyes becoming glassier. After 48 hours, they enter what I'm calling the collector stage. Full zombification. The skin turns gray and mottled, jaw muscles overdevelop to the point of dislocation. Fingers elongate with keratin deposits that form claw-like structures. They constantly drool this amber-colored saliva that carries the parasite's chemical signals. The final photos were nightmarish. The subjects barely looked human anymore, hunched, predatory, with those white eyes and distended jaws full of multiplied teeth. "But here's where it gets worse," Andrew continued, his voice dropping. "After 72 hours without control signals from the prime parasites, the collectors become uncontrollable, violent, aggressive. They attack anything with a heartbeat, form swarms, use pack hunting strategies. The North Koreans discovered this the hard way when they had a containment breach 6 months ago." "Prime parasites?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know the answer. Andrew pulled out a folder, opened it to reveal classified documents he must have stolen from the facility. 2 of them, a queen and a king. They're different from the others, larger, more complex neurologically. They're the ones broadcasting the control signals that keep all the other infected synchronized. Without them, the network collapses and the collectors go feral. He showed me satellite imagery of Pyongyang, specific buildings marked in red. The Supreme Leader has them, both primes. That's what this is really about, John. This isn't just a biological weapons program, it's a takeover. They've already infected 40% of the North Korean population, 10 million people, And they're planning to start on South Korea within 60 days. The scale of it hit me like a punch to the gut. 10 million infected. 10 million human beings reduced to nodes in a parasitic network. How? How do you infect that many people without the world noticing? Slowly. Carefully. They started in remote villages like Songrim 5 years ago. Test sites. Then they moved to small towns, then cities. The infected can pass as normal during the early stages. They go to work, interact with family, all while the parasite is taking root. By the time the transformation becomes obvious, it's too late. The person you knew is gone. I thought about the woman in the garden, the children in the photograph, the entire village, everyone. The children were first, easier to control, easier to monitor the infection process. The adults came later. Andrew's voice was hollow. I've watched them, John. Documented it all. The infected follow a strict schedule. Work, rest, work again. Perfect efficiency. No complaints, no rebellion. Just absolute obedience to signals they can't even consciously perceive. He pulled out another document, this one showing a map of the Korean peninsula, with infection zones marked in expanding circles. Project Crimson Dynasty. That's what they call it. The lead scientist is Dr. Choi Min-jun, former Soviet-trained virologist. The parasites were discovered in a 1970s excavation. Specimens preserved in amber deposits dating back 200 million years. The North Korean military has been weaponizing them since 2018. 200 million years, I repeated, trying to process it. These things evolved before dinosaurs. Before mammals. Before anything we'd recognize as complex life. They were apex predators in a world that doesn't exist anymore. And someone figured out how to wake them up and point them at humanity. I stood, walked to the wall, studied the photographs more closely. The amber deposits, the parasites preserved inside them, the transformation stages. If we destroy the primes, does the whole network collapse? In theory, yes, but getting to Pyongyang is impossible. Even if we could, the Supreme Leader keeps them in a secure facility with multiple redundancies. And John... Andrew's expression darkened. There's something else. Something I haven't been able to confirm but suspect is true. I think the primes are getting harder to control. I think they're evolving, adapting, becoming aware of their own power. Before I could respond, we heard it. The sound of footsteps in the main tunnel. Dozens of them, all perfectly synchronized. The infected had found our hiding place. We need to move, Andrew said, already gathering his documentation, stuffing memory cards and hard drives into a waterproof bag. There's a laboratory complex connected to the mine via service tunnels. If we can reach it, we can download the complete research files and get them to the extraction point. Why would we go deeper? Why not try to escape? Because without proof, real, undeniable proof, no one will believe us, and the Supreme Leader will continue the infection. We need everything. The research files, the infection maps, the military deployment plans. We need evidence that will make the world act. The footsteps were getting closer. Andrew pushed aside a loose rock at the back of the chamber, revealing another narrow passage. This connects to the old excavation tunnels from the 1970s. The infected rarely use them because they're unstable. It'll take us under the mine and come up near the laboratory entrance. We crawled through barely enough space for our bodies, the stones scraping our backs and chests. Behind us, we could hear the infected entering the safe room, their movements precise even in the confined space. We had maybe 10 minutes before they found an alternate route. The service tunnels were worse than the mine. These weren't carved carefully. They'd been blasted through the rock with explosives, leaving jagged walls and unstable ceilings. Signs of violence were everywhere. Claw marks gouged into the stone. Dried blood sprayed in patterns that suggested desperate struggles. Discarded hazmat suits torn and shredded. What happened here? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. 6 months ago. The containment breach I mentioned. 36 collectors escaped from the transformation wing during a power failure. It took them 8 hours to contain the outbreak. 47 people died. Andrew pointed to a section of wall where someone had scratched Korean characters. That says, God has abandoned this place. We moved carefully, avoiding the main passages where we could hear patrols of infected soldiers marching in perfect formation. Through ventilation grates, I caught glimpses of them, 20 or 30 at a time, all moving in lockstep, rifles held at identical angles, eyes glassy and dead. If one patrol spotted us, every infected in the complex would know our location within seconds. The laboratory complex appeared ahead like something from a different world. Where the mine was ancient stone and amber veins, this was ultra-modern steel and glass, a high-tech facility that wouldn't look out of place in any first-world nation. The contrast was jarring, surreal, a testament to how much money and expertise had been poured into this nightmare project. "We split up here," Andrew said, handing me a small camera. "I'll head to the server room, download everything I can. You document the breeding facility and transformation wing. We meet back at this junction in 30 minutes. If I'm not here by then, don't wait. Get to the extraction point and make sure this gets out." "Andrew?" 30 minutes. "John, no heroics." He disappeared down the left corridor, moving with the silent efficiency of someone who'd learned to survive in hell. I went right, following signs in Korean that pointed toward something labeled Cultivation Wing. The breeding facility was beyond anything I'd imagined. The room was massive, easily the size of a warehouse, filled with row after row of bio-containment tanks. Each tank contained amber-colored fluid, and in that fluid, parasites at various stages of growth. I could see them developing, microscopic larvae growing into segmented nightmares. The process accelerated to the point where visible changes happened in real time. I filmed everything, my hands shaking. The creatures grew from nearly invisible specks to 6 inches long in just 9 days, according to the labels. Each batch numbered in the thousands. The automated systems feeding them used a nutrient solution derived from— I checked the technical specifications and felt my stomach turn. Human cerebral spinal fluid. They were literally feeding these things human brain matter to accelerate their growth. The transformation wing was adjacent, connected by an airlock. Inside, medical tables with restraints sat empty, but the walls told the story. Before and after photographs of test subjects lined every surface. I recognized some of the faces from the mine, from the village. Ordinary people transformed into something that barely qualified as alive. The late-stage collectors were kept in reinforced observation cells, and they were worse than Andrew's photographs had suggested. The skin wasn't just gray, it was mottled with dark veins that pulsed visibly beneath the surface. The eyes were completely white, pupils burst outward in star patterns. Jaw muscles had overdeveloped to the point where the lower mandible hung at an impossible angle, revealing teeth that had multiplied and sharpened into something designed to tear flesh. Their fingers had elongated, keratin deposits forming claw-like structures that scratched constantly at the glass. And they were aware. When I entered the observation area, every single collector turned to look at me simultaneously. Then they began to vocalize, clicks and whistles that harmonized into a pattern that made my head throb. That's when I found Dr. Choi's personal logs, a computer terminal in the observation room, still logged in, showing video recordings dated from the past 6 months. I downloaded everything to the camera's storage and started watching the most recent entry. Dr. Choi appeared on screen, looking exhausted and frightened. He spoke in Korean, but there were English subtitles embedded in the file. Entry 247. The project has exceeded all original parameters. The primes are becoming increasingly difficult to control. They're adapting faster than we predicted, developing new signaling patterns that bypass our containment protocols. The late-stage collectors are exhibiting unexpected intelligence. They're forming pack strategies, communicating with each other through complex vocalizations. They're learning. The video cut to security footage showing collectors working together to open a locked door, one of them using a discarded tool with disturbing dexterity, while the others coordinated their movements to apply pressure to the hinges. Dr. Choi's voice continued. "We created something we cannot stop. Even the Supreme Leader doesn't understand what he's unleashed. These parasites aren't just controlling their hosts, they're improving them, optimizing them for survival and spread. Every generation adapts faster, becomes more efficient. If the primes ever escape containment, if they reach a population center outside our control—" He paused, his face pale. "God help us all." An alarm shrieked through the facility, red lights flashing. I'd been so focused on the recordings that I hadn't noticed my elbow brushing against one of the containment tanks. The tank rocked, its seals compromised, and amber fluid began leaking onto the floor. The parasites inside went into a frenzy. They could sense prey nearby. Me. The tank shattered. Dozens of them spilled out, wriggling across the floor with terrifying speed, heading straight for me. I ran, boots slipping on the wet floor, and slammed the airlock door behind me just as the first parasite reached my heel. Through the reinforced glass, I watched them swarm the door, their bodies pressing against the barrier with desperate hunger. But the damage was done. The facility's automated systems had detected the breach. Lockdown protocols activated. Steel shutters began descending over exits. Automated turrets emerged from the ceiling, scanning for movement. And throughout the complex, I heard the sound of doors opening. The collectors, released from their observation cells, pouring into the corridors. I ran toward the server room, toward Andrew, but the collectors were faster. They moved differently than the workers in the mine. Erratic, predatory, coordinated like a wolf pack. They weren't marching in formation anymore. They were hunting. I reached the server room to find Andrew already there, cables connected to multiple computers, downloading terabytes of data. "We've got company," I gasped. "I know. I heard them release through the network." He tapped his scarred ear. "They're using the collectors to flush us out. We've got maybe 3 minutes before they breach this room." "How much longer for the download?" 2 minutes. "But John..." He looked at me, and I saw the realization in his eyes. "They're not just hunting us randomly. They're hurting us, driving us toward something." The server room door buckled as something massive slammed against it. Through the small window, I could see them, dozens of collectors working together, using a broken support beam as a battering ram. The intelligence that Dr. Choi had mentioned wasn't theoretical. It was right here, right now, coordinating an assault that would have required human-level problem-solving. "Download's complete," Andrew said, yanking cables free and stuffing drives into his bag. "But we can't go back the way we came. The main corridors are flooded with them." "Then where?" He pointed to a maintenance hatch in the floor. "Service tunnel. It connects back to the mine system, but it's a route I've never explored. Could be collapsed, could be flooded. But it's our only option." The door finally gave way. Collectors poured through, their eyes fixed on us, mouths hanging open to reveal those multiplied teeth. They moved with disturbing agility, climbing over each other, using the walls and ceiling, coming at us from every angle. Andrew pulled a pair of small explosive charges from his bag, C4, military grade. "Get in the hatch. When I blow these, run, and don't look back." I dropped through the opening into waist-deep water that reeked of sewage and decay. Andrew followed, and the moment he cleared the opening, he activated the charges. The explosion above was deafening, collapsing the floor and sealing the hatch with tons of debris. But we could still hear them, clicking and whistling, communicating through the rubble. They were finding another way. The tunnel was narrow, claustrophobic, filled with water and slime that coated every surface. We waded through it, our movements agonizingly slow. While behind us, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. The collectors had found an access point. They were in the water with us. I could hear them splashing, their movements coordinated despite the difficult terrain. They were crawling through spaces that shouldn't fit human bodies, their joints dislocating and relocating to squeeze through gaps, their flexibility horrifying and unnatural. "There!" Andrew pointed ahead where the tunnel opened up. We pushed forward with desperate energy, the water chest deep now, our breath coming in ragged gasps. The clicking and whistling was right behind us, close enough that I could feel vibrations in the water. We emerged into a section of the mine system I didn't recognize. The tunnels here were older, more primitive, with minimal amber veins providing barely enough light to see. We ran without knowing which direction was out, which was deeper, just following our instincts and praying they were right. Behind us, the collectors emerged from the water tunnel, shaking themselves off like predatory animals, their white eyes reflecting the amber light. There were dozens of them, maybe more, and they were no longer just pursuing. They were coordinating, spreading out to cut off escape routes, forcing us to run in a specific direction. "They're hurting us," I said, realizing what Andrew had mentioned earlier was true. "They want us to go somewhere specific." "I know, but we don't have a choice. It's forward, or die here." We rounded a corner and stopped dead. The chamber ahead was massive, even larger than the main mining cavern. But this one was different. The walls weren't just lined with amber veins. They were completely covered in them, thick as tree trunks, pulsing with that bioluminescent glow in waves that seemed almost coordinated, almost deliberate. The light was brighter here, almost painful, casting everything in shades of gold and shadow. In the center of the chamber, we could see where recent excavation had taken place. Fresh tool marks, broken stone, and in the middle of it all, a section of wall that had been carefully cleared away, revealing something that had been sealed behind meters of solid rock. An amber casing, but different from the others. Massive, maybe 8 feet tall and 4 feet wide, shaped almost like a cocoon or sarcophagus. And inside it, barely visible through the cloudy resin, was a shape. A parasite. But not like the others. This one was huge, at least 18 inches long, with segmentation far more complex than the specimens I'd seen. Its body was darker, almost black, and even in its fossilized state, I could see details that suggested intelligence, purpose, design beyond mere instinct. And as we watched, horrified and transfixed, cracks began spreading across its stone surface. Hairline fractures that spider-webbed through the amber, releasing tiny puffs of air that smelled ancient and wrong. Behind us, the collectors had stopped pursuing. They stood at the chamber entrance, swaying slightly, clicking and whistling in patterns that sounded almost like communication. But they didn't enter. They just stood there, dozens of them, watching. "Why aren't they coming in?" I whispered. Andrew's face had gone pale. "Because they're afraid." More cracks spread across the fossilized parasite's prison. The amber was disintegrating, 200 million years of preservation failing all at once. And beneath the stone, I swear to God, I saw movement. Something ancient, stirring from a sleep that should have been eternal. We were trapped between an army of infected behind us and something far worse waking up ahead of us. The first piece of amber fell away, hitting the chamber floor with a sound like breaking glass. The amber continued to disintegrate, falling away in chunks that revealed more of the creature beneath. It was massive, 18 inches of segmented horror that made the other parasites look like larvae by comparison. The body was darker, almost black, with patterns etched into its carapace that looked deliberate, intentional, not evolution, design. I could see markings carved into the stone around its prison, Korean shamanic symbols mixed with ancient Chinese characters, weathered by time but still legible. Andrew moved closer, his voice barely a whisper as he translated. "The first one. The breaker of chains. Do not wake." "Someone sealed it here on purpose," I said, my throat still raw. "Whoever found this thing didn't want it to ever wake up." Another piece of amber fell away with a sound like cracking bones. The creature beneath stirred, its segments shifting slightly, and I felt it. A pressure in my skull. A presence probing at the edges of my consciousness like fingers testing a locked door. My equipment began to malfunction, the camera's screen flickering, my radio emitting bursts of static that resolved into patterns that sounded almost like words. Behind us, the collectors at the chamber entrance began to convulse. Their synchronized movements broke down into chaos, bodies jerking, limbs flailing, mouths opening to release sounds that were no longer clicks and whistles but screams. Human screams. As if whatever consciousness they'd had before infection was fighting its way back to the surface. One by one, they collapsed. Not dead, but paralyzed. They're staring at nothing while their bodies lay twitching on the stone floor. "John," Andrew breathed, his rifle raised but shaking in his hands. "We need to leave. Right now." But I couldn't move. My legs refused to obey. My body frozen as completely as if I'd been hit with that paralytic again. The ancient parasite was fully visible now, its prison completely shattered, and it was moving. Not with the frantic hunger of the other parasites, but with deliberate purpose, each segment flexing in sequence as it oriented itself after 200 million years of sleep. It turned toward me. I swear to God, it looked at me. Not just in my direction, but at me specifically, with an intelligence that was alien yet somehow focused, aware, curious. "Shoot it," I managed to gasp, though my voice sounded distant even to my own ears. Andrew pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. He tried again, confusion turning to horror as his finger refused to complete the motion. "I can't. My hand won't." The creature began moving toward me, crawling across the chamber floor with that same segmented motion I'd seen in the others, but somehow more coordinated, more purposeful. It reached my boot, began climbing my leg, and every instinct screamed at me to run, to fight, to do anything. But my body was no longer mine to command. It climbed my torso, each segment gripping with those tiny hooks. But the sensation was different. Not aggressive, not hungry, exploratory. Like it was learning what I was, understanding human anatomy through direct contact. When it reached my face, it paused, and I felt that presence in my mind grow stronger, more insistent. Then it forced itself into my mouth. The sensation was violent, invasive, fundamentally wrong in a way that transcended physical pain. I felt it push past my teeth, felt those segments grip my tongue and the roof of my mouth, felt it reach the back of my throat and continue into places nothing should ever go. But this was different from the ritual. The other parasite had been trying to infect me, to override my consciousness. This one was doing something else. It was connecting. I felt it enter my bloodstream, felt it travel through veins and arteries with purpose and direction, felt it reach my brain and begin interfacing with neurons in ways that should have killed me instantly. Instead, everything changed. I was no longer in the chamber. I was somewhere else. Someone else. The earth beneath my feet was different, the air thicker, the sky a color that had no name in any human language. The sun hung larger and redder in the heavens, and the plants around me were alien geometries that moved with their own volition. The parasites were everywhere, not controlling hosts, but existing as themselves, vast swarms that moved through this ancient ecosystem as apex predators. They coordinated not through chemical signals, but through something deeper, something that bypassed biology entirely. Collective consciousness on a planetary scale. I saw their civilization, if that word could even apply. They built nothing, created no tools, left no monuments. But they shaped the world itself, guiding evolution, maintaining balance, ensuring that life flourished in patterns they deemed acceptable. They were shepherds of an entire planet's biosphere. And then I saw the schism. Some of them, the ones that would become the primes, decided that shepherding wasn't enough. They wanted more than balance. They wanted dominance, control. They began infecting other species not to guide them, but to enslave them, creating hosts that would serve as extensions of their will. The Ancient One, the consciousness now sharing my mind, had tried to stop them, had fought against its own kind, trying to preserve the old ways, the balance that had sustained life for eons. But it had lost. The rebels had been too numerous, too powerful, and they had buried it alive, sealed it in amber as a warning to any others who might resist their new order. Millions of years passed in moments. The rebel parasites spread across the planet, infecting and controlling, creating armies of hosts that fought their wars. But they were too successful. They consumed everything, left nothing for themselves, and eventually died out, preserved in amber deposits that would wait another 200 million years for curious primates to dig them up. The Ancient One showed me what it wanted. Not control, not dominance, but an ending. It wanted to stop what its descendants had become, to prevent the cycle from repeating itself, and it wanted my help. But the price would be everything. I opened my eyes. Andrew was standing over me, his face pale with terror. "John, can you hear me?" "Yes." My voice sounded strange, layered somehow, as if two people were speaking simultaneously. "And no, I'm still here, but I'm not alone anymore." I could feel the changes already. Dark veins spreading from where the Ancient One had entered, but these were different. Silver instead of black, pulsing with light instead of that amber glow. My pupils had contracted to slits that let me see in ways human eyes weren't designed for. I could perceive electromagnetic fields, sense the chemical signals that the infected used to communicate, feel the network that connected every parasitized host within miles. And I could control them. I turned toward the collectors lying paralyzed at the chamber entrance. Without speaking, without moving, I reached out through the network and commanded them to stand. They responded instantly, their bodies jerking upright, turning away from Andrew, forming perfect rows like soldiers awaiting orders. John, what did that thing do to you? It gave me power. I looked at my hands, saw those silver veins spreading beneath the skin. The Ancient One can override the Prime's control signals. It's older, more fundamental. Every parasite on this planet descended from it, and it still carries authority over them. But Andrew... I met his eyes, saw the fear there, the realization that his friend was becoming something else. It's taking over, slowly. Eventually, there won't be enough of me left. Then we get it out, like I did. No, we need this. The Ancient One showed me what's coming if the Primes aren't stopped. This doesn't end with North Korea. The larvae have been seeded across the entire country. In the water supply, the soil, waiting for activation. Within months, every person in this nation will be infected. Within a year, South Korea. Within 2 years, China, Russia, everywhere. This is an extinction-level event waiting to happen. I gestured to the collectors standing in formation. But with this power, I can stop it. I can draw them all to one place, destroy the Primes, and call down fire on everything that remains. We can end this, but someone needs to survive to make the call. Someone needs to get the evidence out. Andrew's expression hardened with understanding and grief. You're talking about a nuclear strike. It's the only way to kill the larvae. They're microscopic, seeded across thousands of square kilometers. Conventional weapons won't be enough. We need absolute sterilization. We need to turn this entire region into glass. We made our way out of the mine with an army at our backs. The collectors followed in perfect formation, no longer hunting us, but obeying commands they couldn't resist. More infected joined us as we moved through the tunnels. Workers from the mine, villagers from Songrim, soldiers from the facility. All of them drawn to the Ancient One's presence, unable to refuse its authority. By the time we reached the surface, just before dawn, I commanded 400 infected hosts. They stood in the hills overlooking the village, perfectly still, waiting for orders that I could transmit with nothing more than thought. Andrew was on his encrypted radio, calling for emergency extraction. Viper 6, this is Nomad Actual. I need immediate air support at coordinates. He paused, looking at me. And tell command we have a biological crisis. Apocalyptic scale. Authorization for tactical nuclear response will be requested. Through the Ancient One's connection to the network, I could feel the Primes. They were in Pyongyang, 60 kilometers north, and they were aware of me now. Aware that something had challenged their authority over the swarm. I could sense their confusion, then anger, then fear as they realized what I was. They know, I said. The Primes. They're going to come for me, send everything they have. We need to be ready. The sound of helicopter rotors cut through the dawn air. Andrew's extraction had arrived, a military transport unmarked, capable of getting him to safety and carrying the evidence that would convince the world to act. John, we need to go. Both of us. I shook my head. You know I can't. Look at me, Andrew. Really look. The silver veins had spread further, reaching my hairline, creating patterns across my face that looked almost like circuits. My eyes were completely changed now, the pupils vertical slits that reflected light like an animal's. I wasn't entirely human anymore, and we both knew I never would be again. The Ancient One is giving me time, but not much. Eventually, it'll consume what's left of my consciousness. I'll become something that shouldn't exist. A fusion of human and parasite, belonging to neither species. I can't let that happen where people might find me, where someone might try to weaponize what I've become. I handed Andrew everything. The camera with all the footage I'd taken, the hard drives he'd stolen from the laboratory, my personal recordings documenting the investigation. You need to make them believe you. Show them exactly what's here, what's coming if we don't act. And Andrew... I gripped his shoulder. Tell them to use everything. Hydrogen bombs if they have to. The larvae are everywhere. This entire region needs to burn. This is suicide. This is the only way to win. I'll use the Ancient One's power to draw all the infected to one location. When the Primes come to stop me, I'll destroy them. Without the Primes, the network collapses and the collectors go feral. Easy to contain, easy to kill. I looked north, toward Pyongyang. feeling the malevolent presence of the primes like a storm building on the horizon. But when I give the signal, you need to be far away, because everything within a 100-kilometer radius is going to cease to exist. Andrew's eyes were red, but his voice was steady. We've been through hell together. Yemen, Ukraine, Afghanistan. 8 years of operations that should have killed us both. And this is how it ends? This is how it has to end. One of us survives to tell the truth. One of us makes sure the sacrifice means something. The helicopter was landing, its rotors kicking up dust that glowed amber in the morning light. Andrew climbed aboard, but turned back one last time. We locked eyes, and I saw everything there. The brotherhood we'd built through shared danger. The trust that had kept us alive when everything else failed. The grief of knowing this was goodbye. "Tell Sarah I'm sorry," I said. My wife. God, it felt like a lifetime ago that I'd kissed her goodbye before this mission. Tell her I was thinking about her at the end. I will. And Andrew? Don't try to save me. When the time comes, you push that button. No hesitation. Promise me. I promise. The helicopter lifted off, and I watched it disappear into the dawn sky. Then I turned north, toward Pyongyang, and my army of 400 infected turned with me, their movements synchronized perfectly with my thoughts. Behind us, more emerged from the shadows, workers from other mines, soldiers from distant outposts, villagers from communities I'd never seen. The Ancient One was calling them, broadcasting a signal that overrode the Prime's authority, drawing every infected host toward me like iron filings to a magnet. By the time we'd marched 10 kilometers, I commanded thousands. By 20 kilometers, tens of thousands. The swarm was growing, feeding on itself. Every infected person in North Korea inexorably drawn to join the march. The Ancient One pulsed in my mind, and I understood its message clearly. It's time to end this. Time to prevent the cycle from repeating. Time to give these enslaved souls the only peace that remained: oblivion. 3 days later, Andrew sat in a secure briefing room at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. The room was filled with people who mattered: generals, intelligence directors, policy advisors, all of them watching the footage I'd captured with expressions that cycled between disbelief, horror, and finally, grim acceptance. The laboratory, the breeding facilities, the transformation chambers, Dr. Choi's confession, the collectors demonstrating pack intelligence, and finally the chamber where the Ancient One had awakened. Footage captured from Andrew's body cam as we fled. "How many infected?" a general asked. 15 million. Maybe more. 40% of North Korea's population, all of them under parasitic control. And the larvae have been seeded across the entire nation. If they activate... Andrew let the implication hang. Recommendations? Immediate tactical nuclear strike. Multiple warheads, spread across the region. We need to sterilize everything within a 100-kilometer radius of these coordinates. He uploaded the data to the briefing room system. My operative is currently leading the infected to a centralized location. He's using some kind of control over them to draw them all together. It's our only chance to contain this. Your operative. The Director of National Intelligence looked at Andrew with sharp eyes. Agent Kim, where is Agent Reddick now? He's with them, inside the swarm. Can we extract him? Andrew's voice was hollow. No, sir. Agent Reddick was infected by a parasitic specimen that grants him control over the others. But the infection is terminal. He knows he's not coming back. He's choosing to use what time he has left to save everyone else. The room fell silent. Then slowly, the general spoke. Authorization for nuclear response? The director nodded. Granted. 16 tactical warheads, hydrogen-based, spread across the target zone. Launch on confirmation of Agent Reddick's signal. Andrew's encrypted phone buzzed. A message, audio only, heavily distorted by interference. He played it on speaker. My voice, barely recognizable, layered with something that wasn't human. Andrew, it's done. I found them. The primes. Destroyed both of them. But the infection. I can feel myself disappearing. The Ancient One is taking over. There isn't much of me left. background noise. Thousands of voices clicking and whistling, creating a chorus that sounded almost like singing. I'm at the coordinates I sent you. Every infected host within 100 kilometers, maybe more. 15 million of them all gathered here, all waiting. The Ancient One showed me something, Andrew. The larvae. They're everywhere. In the water table, in the soil, dormant but viable. You need to hit everything. Burn it all. A pause. Labored breathing. Use the hydrogen bombs. All of them. Turn this region into glass. It's the only way to guarantee the larvae are dead. The only way to prevent this from spreading. There are 15 million people here, all of them enslaved by parasites. If you don't stop it now, it reaches South Korea within a week, China within a month, then everywhere else. This is humanity's last chance. Another pause. When my voice came back, it was quieter, more human. I want you to know I'm not afraid. The Ancient One showed me what it was trying to prevent. Its own kind became monsters, enslaved entire ecosystems, destroyed themselves in their hunger for control. It tried to stop them and failed. But maybe now, maybe this time, we can finish what it started. Maybe this is redemption. For it. For me. When you press that button, I won't be alone. The Ancient One will be with me. And all these people, these 15 million souls trapped in their own bodies. Maybe we can give them peace. Maybe we can give them an ending that means something. The transmission degraded further, my voice fading beneath the clicking and whistling of the swarm. See you on the other side, brother. Then silence. Andrew looked at the general, his hand steady as he held the encrypted phone. That's the signal, sir. Authorization to launch. The general nodded to an aide, who opened a secure communications channel. This is Olympus Actual. Authorization Echo Tango 97. Launch all packages on target coordinates. God help us all. Andrew closed his eyes, whispered words only he could hear. Goodbye, John.